Nariti was annoyed. Profusely. He watched as the human homeworld was bombarded with asteroids, then with nuclear devices, and then with orbital strikes. The orbital strikes had finally ended his long, painful session. Leaning back from the screen wall, he didn't understand why the creators of this game insisted on a screen. VR works much better. His eyes closed, feathers brushing his forehead. Breathing heavily, he let out a shrill whistle. It pierced the silence of the room and most of the others connecting it. Grumpily, his roommate peeked in through the door after it slid open. Granted, he was a lot larger than Nariti's own species, the Frinty. 4 fingers on each hand. Brando. Nariti couldn't say his actual name without screwing up at least 3 syllables. Grando would do, Grando had said. Still playing, Nariti. He grunted in response and then moved closer to the screen wall, which recalculated to display the results of the campaign in big, black lettering covering the entirety of the wall. Ouch. How the heck were you able to survive a supervolcano, asteroid diversion strikes, a self-inflicted nuclear war, before losing to the first alien invaders? You remember that time you played, right? Nariti asked, eyes still closed. Yeah, it was brutal. Everyone starved due to a famine. Some crop called potatoes were pulled out from under my civilizations. Extending a finger to point straight up, Nariti said, lesson number 1. Diversify food sources. Either all will die in a famine, or the humans will die of malnutrition. We all loved learning that about them. Number 2. They are violent, easily offended by everything, and really, really good at war. Practical experience taught us that. Number 3. You will lose. I never understood that part until now. Every path seems mined with errors, problems and unavoidable faults. Their earliest spacecraft lacked the supplies or efficiencies to achieve much. The entire world tries to kill them in creative ways. They themselves kill each other in creative ways. There should be no way that this species should have become spacefaring against those odds, let alone repel 3 alien invasions with superior technology and survive numerous genocides against them. The discussion was becoming less centered on the game and more on how humanity and reality had actually made it to space. It amazed them to say the least. Nariti was pulled out of his introspective understanding when their human roommate walked in. So what did you accomplish this time? He asked while sipping from a ceramic cup that his species insisted at using. Steam rose from the surface, an indication of how hot it was. Well, Axel Heilman, I survived through alien asteroid strikes and nuclear war and then died at the alien invasion. Nariti didn't like his haughty manner when he referred to the game. As far as they knew, he hadn't gotten much further in defeating the game. What was the political stability at the time of the nuclear war and the combined spacefaring level before the asteroid strikes? He moved closer to the screen. Examining the data present, he grunted. Nothing could have been done about the nuclear war unless the asteroid strikes had been deflected. The strain on resources, ecosystems, and infrastructure pushed us to the point of war. The starfaring technology was adequate to intercept, although timing would be the crucial aspect, and that always rests on a pin. As for the aliens, they deployed chemical weapons. Very little you can do about that. You had several good commanders, but again, resources limited what they could accomplish. Are you suggesting you can do better, Axel? Asked Grando. Perhaps, Grando inista dointe. The variables present can lead to unpredictable results, but that's the endearing value to the game. He set his cup down on a desk appropriated to his size, and then sat too. He commandeered the screen, which reformatted. Removing a set of electronics, he plugged them into the various ports. He started the game. I suggest you watch that wall, he pointed behind him, where the screen showed a much larger version of his tiny screen. It's easier to see what I do that way. Nariti took a seat, followed by Grando. Staring up at the graphical display, they watched as Axel opened up several screens and left them sitting open. Boxes were checked and values tweaked. Then, he collapsed the screens, and the graphical display showed a handful of humans, scantily clad in furs and woven plant matter. Axel then zoomed out a ways, to the point where the humans were specks on their screens, and sped up the simulation. Slowly, the pinpricks of light multiplied, the shaky structures of hides and wood were replaced with well-built wooden and stone. Zooming in, the formerly primitive humans could be seen adopting cultures, religions, and professions. Then it all collapsed. Invaders from a different nation disrupted the progress of the empire. I have had early empires last longer than that, Nariti said. You are familiar with the fact you have less and less control over human governance later in the game, right? On screen, another empire collapsed. It was indicated by a blinking light on one menu and on the map as cities burning. You can influence the course of history by stacking up the past failures. The first nation that collapsed wasn't united enough to survive. The second stagnated and would have fallen later as a depraved empire. Sure, it launched a dark age, but a golden age begins elsewhere, and the knowledge is preserved in various places around the known world. It's around here where history becomes arbitrary, but sentiments carry on. If poorly managed, you get high-stake wars of annihilation. This is also where military doctrine grows strongest, so if you can do it, which I've heard some have, you can unite the world, albeit on a somewhat unstable footing. Several menus were opened, and Nariti gaped and sputtered. You're increasing nationalism. I thought your histories reflect poorly on that. Author's account and link to original text is in the description.